So, okay, with that being said, excited to introduce our speaker, William Lin, who is an incoming freshman at MIT studying computer science. He has participated in various computing-related contests like AMC, which is mostly math, USICO, and the International Olympiad in Informatics, and he was a 2019 silver medalist. He also is an incredible YouTuber. You should check out his videos. We are excited to have him as a speaker, and now, William, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Let me see how. Okay, give me a second. So Olympiads are similar to Olympics, but instead of being about sports, Olympiads are academic contests. There are many competitions and programs that have the word Olympiad in their names, but I'm mostly referring to the International Science Olympiad for the rest of this presentation. The five most well-known or important of these Olympiads are IMO for math, IOI for CS, IPHO for physics, ICHO for chemistry, and IBO for biology. To qualify for one of these Olympiads, first you need to be a high school student, then you would need to participate in your national Olympiad. The Olympiad organization in your country will then select 4 to 6 students to, depending on the Olympiad, to represent your country in the International Olympiad. The International Olympiad consists of 2 contest days with about a 5-hour contest on each day. Based on the ranking, contestants are given gold, silver, and bronze medals. And unlike some other contests, it's not like the first place is given gold, the second place is given silver, and the third place is given bronze. Instead, the prizes are pretty generous. So approximately the top 1/12 are given gold, the next 1/6 are given silver, and the next 1/4 are given bronze. Okay. And even though these Olympiads are only for secondary school students, they have the purpose of challenging the best students around the world. So these contests have extremely high standards. As a result, this is often used to help with college admissions. For example, in the US, a disproportionately large amount of medalists get into top universities. And also in Taiwan, obtaining a medal will guarantee admission into National Taiwan University, which is the best university here. Obviously, college admissions shouldn't be why you're doing this, but it definitely does justify spending more time on these over other things like schoolwork, especially to parents who care a lot about college admissions. One thing to note is that even though these contests are big and prestigious, they are limited in what they test. A 5-hour contest may seem like a very long time when compared to tests in school, but if you compare it to projects in real life, 5 hours is pretty short and you can't really do anything from it. So, and also unlike some other types of contests, Olympiads are very objective in your grading. So you'll be solving a given set of problems instead of making projects or doing research, as those are hard to compare objectively to each other. Okay, next. The International Olympiad in Informatics, or IOI for short, is considered the CS Olympiad. I don't exactly know why it's called informatics, but it might have something to do with how the contest doesn't cover all topics in computer science due to the constraint of Olympiads that I mentioned earlier. IOI is mostly about algorithms and data structures in theoretical computer science, and it is basically a competitive programming contest for secondary school students. And I'll explain more about competitive programming later. It doesn't include a lot of the other important and interesting topics in CS, such as machine learning, computer systems, and cryptography. Next. Since I expected a significant portion of the audience to be from the US, and also because I qualified for IOI through the US, I'll be briefly introducing the USA Computing Olympiad, which is the national Olympiad for the US. There are 4 divisions in USACO, which are bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, with the platinum division being the hardest. There are 4 contests in a year, and after those 4 contests, the top 20-something students are invited as finalists for the camp. And in the camp, one group of the students will be taking lessons while the other group will be taking more contests for selecting the 4 students to represent the US at the IOI. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned competitive programming earlier, so I'll explain more about it here. In a contest, you are given multiple problems, and for each problem, you need to write a program to solve that problem. Your program is tested automatically by running it with certain input data and making sure that the output data your program returns is correct. In addition to the correctness of your program, time usage and memory usage are also taken into account. So you need to make sure that your program doesn't take too long to run or use too much memory. For some people, including myself, these contests are actually pretty fun and exciting. So we consider these contests to be just like any other sport or video game. On an unrelated note, if you actually want to see what happens in a contest, then you can search my name on YouTube and you can find some of my contest recordings and some other videos. Next slide. So in competitive programming, there are 3 groups of skills that you will learn and need as you do it, namely programming, algorithms, data structures, math, and problem solving. Next slide. So obviously, as the name suggests, you're going to be programming when you do competitive programming. This skill is one that you should definitely develop before starting competitive programming, but naturally, you'll continue to develop it afterwards. The most frustrating thing about competitive programming is that when you submit your program and the judge says that your program doesn't give the correct output, they won't tell you what input they gave to your program to cause it to fail. So you kind of have to guess and try to find flaws in your program, which is very hard if you don't have enough debugging experience. And after you find the flaw, you still need to identify the cause and fix it. And so this is one aspect which is really important in competitive programming. And the last thing you know is that unfortunately, not all languages were made equal. And for reasons mostly because of speed, C++ is the best language and most common for competitive programming, followed by Java and Python. If you already know Java or Python, you don't need to switch languages yet, but I would switch from Python after making USACO Silver or Gold, and I would switch from Java after making USACO Platinum. So the idea is that uh, if you already know a bit of programming in Java or Python, then you typically want to focus on the other 2 skills first before optimizing this part. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned earlier, your program can't be too slow or use too much memory when the judge runs it. So this is where a good knowledge of algorithms and data structures comes into play. You need to have a good knowledge of algorithms as well as the ability to be able to modify existing algorithms or even come up with your own algorithms to make your program efficient enough. Maybe you haven't heard of algorithms and data structures that much because of all the news which talk about AI and machine learning, but they're actually a very important topic in computer science. And if you end up pursuing a computer science degree in the future, you'll definitely encounter a few classes related to this topic. Next slide. Last thing about competitive programming, which may be a bit surprising for some people, is that it requires math and problem solving. Because of this, if you happen to have experience with the AMC, the AIME, USMO, or even the IMO, then you start competitive programming with a pretty decent advantage. Personally, I qualified for AIME when I started competitive programming. However, this is still a skill that can definitely be improved while doing competitive programming. So I wouldn't worry too much if I hadn't touched the math contest yet. I know that some people might not like math that much, but you're going to have to deal with math anyways while you're learning about algorithms and data structures. It's mostly about discrete math, which includes combinatorics, graph theory, and number theory. And it's more like working with logic puzzles instead of the regular math, which most people see in school. On an unrelated note, I actually find math taught in school somewhat boring, so there's definitely the possibility that you might find some other topics in math interesting. You just need to go out there and try to learn more. Next slide. So to illustrate exactly what I mean by discrete math and logic puzzles, I have a relatively simple example of a math problem here. You start off with an 8x8 chessboard. For some reason, your chessboard is missing two opposite corners as shown below. You have 31 dominoes and you want to tell what's left of the chessboard with these dominoes. And a domino is a 2x1 tile. And is it possible to do it or not? As you can see, this looks much more like a logic puzzle than some math problem that you give in school. And if people are interested in the solution, I can come back to it later. Next slide. There are many other competitive programming contests for high school students. For example, for students in the US, there's the Virginia Tech High School Programming Competition, and in other countries, there will definitely be other local competitions for high schoolers as well. And these contests don't just stop in high school. In college, there's also the ACM ICPC, which I'll be looking forward to. And on top of that, there are also online contests. For example, the website Codeforces, which is a well-known competitive programming website, frequently hosts contests. Google and Facebook both have a series of contests that they run every year. More specifically, there's the Google Code Jam, Google Kickstart, and the Facebook Hacker Cup. Two main reasons why people do college and online contests are that they can look good on your resume and they prepare you for technical interviews from big tech companies. Next slide. Okay, so the situation for competitive programming depends on the country or school that you're in. So for example, in Taiwan, if you're in a local school, which is hard to get into, then they usually have teachers, teachers and clubs, which will help you with every Olympiad. But I don't see so much of this in high schools in the US. In most cases, it's really hard to find support for competitive programming in real life since it's not something which is widely done. You'll have to find everything online. So if you want to learn some new concept, you would just search it on Google. And so, for example, if I want to learn what merge sort is, then I would just search on Google, how does merge sort work? And there would be a bunch of articles, and I just read them all until I understand it. Yeah, it's basically that simple. And if you're actually interested in starting competitive programming, after this presentation ends, you can just search on Google how to start competitive programming. And you'll also find more than enough resources to start with. Next slide. And this also applies to programming in general. If you're just trying to learn to program, there definitely are classes in school that will teach you how to program, but you don't really have to limit yourself to classes in school or college. The current education system, I feel like, is far behind our rapidly changing society. For example, I believe that students don't really learn to program early enough, and isn't a greater emphasis on programming in school. If you want to become more competitive, then if you want to become more competent, then there's a lot that you can do by yourself outside of school. Then there's also college, which used to be valuable, but now it's not as valuable because information is now much more easily accessible outside of traditional education. There are people out there who graduated with different majors, such as mechanical engineering in college, but then they decided to switch to software engineering due to reasons such as not being able to find a job or not having enough pay. And just go to a coding boot camp for about a year. And after that, they are trained with the necessary skills to become a software engineer. College costs a lot more than these boot camps, but the education you get there isn't uh, as valuable as it was in the past. And right now, I feel like most people go there just for the diploma and the networking. So in conclusion, with the proper dedication and motivation, anyone could learn a lot from using online resources. Next slide. One thing to note about competitive programming for beginners is that its learning curve is very high. Programming is already very hard to learn. It's almost like a new language. And as I said earlier, debugging in competitive programming is very hard. Then you have algorithms and data structures, which is a completely new topic for most people. And on top of that, you also have math and problem solving, which can be hard for a lot of people. So everything about competitive programming is hard to learn. So a lot of effort is required. So it's important to take this into account and to not be discouraged. Next. Another thing that causes a lot of discouragement is the score distributions of these Olympiads. From tests in school, you probably expect a majority of the students to earn around 80 to 90%, which is shown by the graph on the left. The graph on the right, however, shows the score distribution of a past USACO contest. And as you can see, a lot of the people have pretty low scores. School tests consist of relatively boring tasks and focuses much more on memorization, whereas Olympiads contain a lot more problem solving. Definitely takes a lot of time to get better at problem solving, but it's the difficulty of the Olympiads which gives them their value. Next. So some suggestions I have for students which are interested in CS. If you have some spare time, then you can definitely give competitive programming a try. It definitely does not hurt to learn some new skills, and you might even enjoy it after trying it. If if you're looking to excel in competitive programming, note that it will take a lot of time to master the various skills that are essential to competitive programming. And as I said earlier, I had started programming in third grade, so I already had a lot of experience. And lastly, as for general topics in CS, if you haven't already done so, try to get into whatever you are interested in, whether it be web development, machine learning, AI, or cryptography, by just searching for information about it online. And you'll be surprised about how much information you can learn on Google outside of classes. And next slide. So this is, I finished my slides, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do you have any tips for college apps? You know, that time of year.
This is an interesting question because
Sorry, I know it's kind of loaded, but like, okay, specifically like for CS maybe, if that helps.
CS, I feel like you definitely, to be honest, I don't I don't know about the general. I don't know about advice for general public because I heard that a lot of people who get admitted for CS actually have never coded in high school or before that. So um, this is I would definitely like to see more people start coding earlier, but I think but it just confuses me how um, I can't really say that tell people to go code for college apps because I don't actually know if it works. So maybe it might be the case that studying more for standardized tests or working more on your college essay, maybe that actually helps more. And I would not know. But if you're interested in a particular subject, if you happen to be interested in a particular subject, then it's probably worth more to go for that subject instead of the other things like standardized testing and essays, because you also get to pursue your passion and it will end up helping you in your career in the future.
Solid.
I have another question. What's one challenge of running your YouTube channel? Like knowing how big it is, that's why.
One challenge about running my YouTube channel.
Yeah, any challenge, anything you faced. Dilemmas.
I've never thought about this. It's probably just, I would say it's coming up with, uh, coming up with new and interesting content because um, coming up with good and interesting ideas often isn't that that's that's a very hard, that's something which is hard for me. So yeah, I guess that'd be my number one challenge in
Okay.
running a YouTube channel.
So we have two questions. The first one says, what are you going to specialize at MIT?
I actually don't know. Um, there's a there's a lot of things that I could get into, such as which are common for CS majors, such as software engineering, quant firms, and there's also research. So I think during college, I heard that the best strategy is to try to expand and uh, just try to experience some of every possible thing out there. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'll probably try to get an internship and also do um, some research. And based on that, I'll see what I like. And after that, I'll hopefully have a better idea of what I want to pursue in the future.
Another question is, do students in Taiwan learn coding much earlier?
Students in Taiwan do not learn coding much earlier. It just happens that I actually, yeah, not that I'm aware of. It just happened that I got into it much earlier than others.
And then another one is, why are you choosing to go to college for CS if you're already so good at, or have such a good background in it?
So, as I said earlier, there's also research which I might want to get into, and if I end up wanting to get like a PhD or something, then you kind of have to go through the college route. And I guess there's also like getting a diploma that's and networking, as I said earlier, is somewhat important. And lastly, it's mostly there's also pressure from my parents. I think they really want me to go to college. So I'm just like, um, for the all the reasons above that I mentioned earlier, um, I decided that yeah, I'll just go through college and see what happens. At least try out like a year or so.
Okay. And then here, there are a few more. How much training does it usually take to be prepared for IMO, since I really want to take it? Says someone.
For the IMO, I'm not really sure because that's I don't have that much experience with it. But from what I've seen of other IMO contestants, they usually start really early. They start training really early in primary school. So you often see them training for contests in primary school, and then in middle school, they still do contests. Like for example, math counts, and then in high school they continue with the series of AMC contests. And yeah, basically they start at a really young age. I don't know how much practice they put in per day, but the general trend is that they start pretty early.
Okay, and then why did you choose MIT in particular? What did they have that appealed to you?
It was mostly the community. So a lot of my other friends that I made in these competitions, they also ended up going to MIT. So I decided that it would probably be a good place for me to go to.
And then another person says, do you want to start your own company before graduation? Is that graduation from college or, oh yeah, definitely.
So I don't necessarily see why it has to be before graduation, but if something happens to come up, then maybe I could do it before graduation. About like starting my own company in general, yeah, that's another possible that's another possible thing that I could do in the future, and it'll have to depend on my experience my experiences in the next few years to determine exactly what I want to pursue.
Okay, so are there any last questions?
What do you think is like the biggest thing that helped you get like super good at IOI and programming?
The biggest
like
thing
any
is
resources or
resources. I did most of my practice on code courses, and yeah, I would say that might be the only problem set or website you need.
Okay, so any questions? Any last questions? Okay. Thank you, William, so much. We know how good you are, and oh, there's
another one.
What was it like?
What was it like?
What was it like filling out the MIT application? Like treacherous, hard?
The MIT application was better than other applications because was it like I really did not like the huge essay on the Common App, and that was and the essay on Common App was the prompt was somewhat vague, so I had a really hard time with that, and I felt like the essays for MIT were more objective. So writing the essays for MIT wasn't as difficult, or it wasn't as difficult for me as writing essays for some of my other schools.
Okay, Ivan asks, have you tried those Google and Amazon interview coding websites? I think you had a video on it, I think. Pretty sure I saw one like that.
Interview websites. I've tried, for example, lead code, which is pretty big in interview preparation.
The same guy asked, what do you think about Stanford's computer science program?
I don't really know much about Stanford's computer science program, so I can't even really answer much about MIT's computer science program either.
Wait, what was your second choice?
Second choice was, it was more like I only wanted to make MIT, and then the other schools were like forced by my parents. The other schools, I applied to other schools because they're either safeties or my parents forced me to apply to them. So I don't necessarily have a second choice. If I didn't get into MIT, like my parents would probably just tell me to choose the one with the next highest ranking. So I guess you could count that as a second choice.
Okay, I think those are all the questions.
You guys should check out William's YouTube channel for real.
Yeah, it's great. Like, he posts like almost like stream like videos on his competitions for like the Google competitions. I saw that one, and they're really interesting. Like the way he solves them. Yeah. So thanks a lot.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks so much,
a lot
William.
for having.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I had a great time here. Have a good day, everyone.